Have you ever considered that something as private and familiar as masturbation, something you've done for decades, might now be silently working against you? What if I told you that after age 60, this once innocent habit could be quietly damaging your heart, inflaming your prostate, weakening your erections, and even dulling your brain, all without you realizing it? I'm Dr. James, a men's health specialist with over 30 years of experience helping older men reclaim strength, intimacy, and confidence in the second half of life. I've seen it all: stories of quiet frustration, secret anxiety, and health declines that were entirely preventable if only someone had spoken up sooner. So today, I'm speaking up. Because here's the truth: most men continue to pleasure themselves exactly the same way they did at 30. Same habits, same mindset, without knowing that the aging body responds very differently. And that's the paradox. What once helped you sleep, relax, and recharge may now be draining your energy, aggravating your prostate, and rewiring your brain's reward system. But this isn't a warning to stop, it's a call to evolve. In this video, I'll reveal the 5 most common masturbation mistakes men make after 60, and how to fix them with awareness, strength, and grace. We'll talk about your heart, your hormones, your emotions, and yes, your erections. The first mistake might be something you did just last night, thinking it was helping your health. But in men over 60, it could be doing the exact opposite. Let's talk about it now. Before we begin, if you're new here, I invite you to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss another real conversation about men's health, made especially for those of us over 60. And if this topic resonates with you, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0. Your feedback helps me make this content better for you. Let's start with the first and perhaps most overlooked mistake, one that quietly strains your body every time it happens. Most men don't even realize they're doing it because it feels so familiar. But after 60, this habit can leave you feeling drained, dizzy, or worse. And it all begins with how hard, how fast, and how forcefully you touch yourself. Mistake number 1: using the same pressure, speed, or intensity as when you were younger. I want to tell you about a man I once treated. His name was Frank. He was 72, widowed for a few years, and by all appearances, in decent health. He came into my office complaining of fatigue, occasional dizziness, and some mild pelvic discomfort. Nothing alarming at first glance. But as we talked and I asked the right questions, the truth surfaced. Frank was still pleasuring himself the way he had when he was in his 40s. Fast, firm, and frankly, forceful. He'd never stopped to consider that his body had changed, that what once felt good might now be taking a toll. And he's not alone. In fact, most older men make this same mistake. They assume that because masturbation has always been a private, natural habit, it doesn't require any adjustment. But that's not how the aging body works. Your skin becomes thinner. Your blood vessels are less flexible. Nerve endings aren't quite as sharp. And most importantly, your cardiovascular system, the system that supports erections, no longer handles stress the way it used to. What does this mean in real life? It means that old habit of gripping tightly, rushing toward release, or tensing up during climax can now lead to symptoms you might not even connect to the act itself. Things like lightheadedness afterward, a rapid or irregular heartbeat, sore lower back, or muscle cramping in the legs or pelvis. Over time, this kind of repeated overexertion, especially during solo stimulation, can wear down the nervous system and increase pressure on your heart and prostate. But the biggest issue isn't just the physical strain, it's the mindset behind it. You see, many men approach masturbation like a task, a quick release, a routine. They rush through it as if it's something to get over with instead of something to be present for. And in that rush, they miss the opportunity to listen to their body. They ignore subtle signs, tightness, fatigue, numbness, because they've been conditioned to believe that pleasure must always be fast and intense to be satisfying. That's simply not true, especially not now. Frank told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Doctor, I thought slowing down meant I was losing something, but now I realize it was the only way to truly feel again." And he was right. When older men shift their approach, slowing down the pace, softening their grip, paying attention to breathing, they often find that not only is the experience safer, it's actually better, more fulfilling, more connected, more relaxing. Instead of treating masturbation like a pressure valve, it becomes what it should have always been: a way to care for yourself, release stress gently, and maintain connection to your body without punishment. There are practical ways to do this. Create a calm environment, use a water-based lubricant to reduce friction, experiment with different positions that take pressure off your hips and lower back, and most importantly, listen to your body. If you feel tension or strain, ease up. There's nothing to prove. You've already lived through your proving years. This stage of life is about honoring your body, not battling it. When I suggest this to patients, some of them chuckle. "Doc, you want me to meditate before I do the deed?" they ask, and I say, "Not necessarily, but if you breathe, stay present, and treat your body with respect, you'll be amazed at the difference it makes." Here's what often surprises men the most. The more gentle and mindful they become, the stronger their erections actually feel. The more consistent their climax, the better they sleep afterward. Because they're no longer shocking their nervous system, they're working with it. That's the hidden key most men never find until they're older. Pleasure doesn't come from intensity. It comes from alignment. You might be wondering, what if I've been doing it the same way for 40 years? Is it too late to change? Absolutely not. The male body is incredibly resilient, even into your 70s and 80s. But you have to meet it where it is today, not where it was decades ago. That's not a loss. That's wisdom. And once you embrace that shift, you'll start noticing improvements not just in your sexual health, but in your energy, sleep, and mood too. Your body is always speaking to you. After 60, it speaks a little softer, but that doesn't mean you stop listening. It means you lean in closer. And now let me ask you something. Have you ever finished pleasuring yourself and instead of feeling satisfied or relaxed, you felt a little bit empty, maybe even restless? You might not think much of it, but what if that feeling wasn't about your body at all, but about your brain? Because the next mistake we need to talk about has nothing to do with how you move your hands and everything to do with what your eyes are watching while you do. And the truth behind it might surprise you. Mistake number 2. Watching overstimulating porn, designed for younger men. A few years ago, I sat across from a patient named Larry. He was 68, a retired school teacher, thoughtful, well-spoken. But that day he looked tired, emotionally more than physically. After a few minutes of talking, he lowered his voice and said something that caught my attention. "Doc, I don't know what's wrong with me. I watch videos like I always have, but I don't feel anything anymore. It's like I've gone numb, not just physically, but inside too." What Larry described isn't uncommon. In fact, it's becoming more and more familiar, especially among men in their 60s and 70s. Because here's the hard truth. The kind of pornography that dominates the internet today, fast, extreme, high volume, designed for quick visual highs, was never built for older men. It was made for overstimulated young brains chasing novelty. And when older men consume that same content, their brains, already shifting with age, simply can't process it the same way. You see, the brain releases dopamine, the pleasure chemical, when it's exposed to sexual stimulation. But when that stimulation comes in the form of highly edited, rapid-fire, unrealistic pornography, especially when consumed regularly, the brain starts to adapt. It raises its own threshold for pleasure. It begins to expect more. More intensity, more novelty, more shock, just to feel the same initial high. Over time, this process, called dopamine desensitization, dulls your ability to enjoy simple, real-life pleasure. What once excited you now feels flat. What once made you feel alive now barely moves the needle. And the damage isn't just sexual, it's emotional too. Men who fall into this loop often report feeling disconnected, not just from their partners or potential intimacy, but from themselves. They say things like, "I feel hollow afterward," or "It just makes me sad now." For some, it creates irritability or anxiety. For others, a kind of fog. Larry told me he was starting to forget small things more often. He couldn't focus during conversations. He didn't feel like himself anymore. Now, I'm not here to shame anyone. Let me be clear, sexual stimulation is healthy. Desire is human. But the kind of visual input you feed your brain matters, especially after 60, when your brain becomes more sensitive to how it handles stimulation and reward. You can't pour boiling water into a cracked glass and expect it not to break. The same goes for flooding your nervous system with hypersexualized, overstimulating material when it's already trying to stay balanced. So what can you do? The first step is to pause and notice how you feel, not just during, but after. Are you feeling calm, centered, satisfied, or are you left feeling distracted, tense, or a little disappointed? If it's the latter, that's your sign. Your brain is asking for something different. Many of my patients have found unexpected relief and even deeper pleasure by replacing visual overstimulation with something softer, erotic literature, sensual audio, or simply using their imagination. It sounds simple, even old-fashioned, but it works. It helps retrain the brain to respond to subtlety again, to reconnect with fantasy that isn't dictated by someone else's camera angles, but by your own mind and memory. And more importantly, it puts you back in control, not the content. One man, Carl, 73, made this shift and came back to me months later saying, "Doc, I didn't realize how much my brain was being hijacked. Now I feel everything again. I even sleep better." And I've heard that over and over. Because the truth is, overstimulating porn isn't just exhausting your dopamine system, it's starving your real-life joy. It's giving you speed without satisfaction, movement without meaning. And I know this may be a hard conversation to have with yourself. It requires honesty. But I believe there's something powerful about choosing depth over intensity. That's one of the privileges of growing older. You get to redefine what pleasure means on your own terms. Now, you might be wondering, if visual overstimulation can dull the brain, what effect does it have on the body, on the actual structures that make sexual health possible? That's where the next mistake becomes critical, because it doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects how you function. And it centers around one small gland that plays a far bigger role than most men realize. Let's talk about it. Mistake number 3. Ignoring your prostate's needs. Years ago, I treated a man named George. He was 74, sharp as ever, a retired Navy officer with a firm handshake and a dry sense of humor. But he sat across from me one afternoon, eyes a little tired, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. He said, "Doc, I don't know what's going on. Things just feel different down there. Not painful exactly, but pressure. Some nights I wake up needing to go to the bathroom 2-3 times, and lately climax doesn't feel the same either." Now George isn't alone. In fact, what he described is something I hear regularly: men over 60 feeling slight but consistent changes in their pelvic region, assuming it's just getting older and never connecting the dots between those changes and their personal habits. What many men don't realize is that the prostate, the small walnut-sized gland just below your bladder, is incredibly sensitive to how you treat your body, especially in the most intimate moments. And when we ignore it, it starts to speak louder in ways we can't ignore. As men age, the prostate naturally begins to enlarge. It's called benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH. It's not cancer, but it can make life uncomfortable. Urine flow weakens, urgency increases, and for some, ejaculation begins to feel less satisfying or even uncomfortable. Now here's where it connects to masturbation. If you're applying heavy pressure to your perineum, the space between the scrotum and anus, or if you're repeatedly tensing your pelvic floor during climax, or worse, forcing yourself to delay release thinking it will make you stronger, you could be doing more harm than good. George had picked up the habit of holding back ejaculation during solo play. He'd read somewhere that it could help build stamina or retain energy. What it did in his case was create tension and inflammation in the very area that needed gentleness. Over time, this pressure built up in his pelvic floor and around the prostate, and the result was that full body ache, the frequent urination, the vague but nagging discomfort. His body wasn't betraying him. It was begging him to listen. The prostate isn't just about reproductive function, it's tied into your urinary system, your nerves, your muscular health. And when you overstimulate, overclench, or overload that region, it reacts. Not always loudly, but consistently. A dull ache here, a weaker flow there, maybe a burning sensation you brush off at first. And the real danger is when men ignore these signs until something more serious develops. Prostatitis, urinary tract infections, or in rare cases, missing early signs of prostate disease because they assumed everything was just age. The shift doesn't require you to stop masturbating, far from it. In fact, healthy sexual activity done with care can help the prostate by encouraging circulation and clearing out stagnant fluid. But it has to be approached with a different mindset. Relax your body during arousal. Don't rush. Don't clench your core or your thighs or your pelvic muscles like you're bracing for a sprint. And above all, let release happen naturally. Don't force it and don't hold it in. I've seen men feel a complete turnaround in just a few weeks by making these subtle changes. George was one of them. We worked together on posture, breathing techniques, and relaxing his pelvic floor. His symptoms eased, his sleep improved, and perhaps most importantly, he reconnected with his own body in a more compassionate way. He told me, "I didn't know I was putting that much pressure on myself, physically and mentally. I thought I had to be in control all the time. Turns out, letting go was the real strength." That moment stuck with me because it speaks to so many men's silent struggle. We're taught that control equals power, but after 60, wisdom lies in knowing when to ease off the gas and listen to what your body's really asking for. Your prostate doesn't need dominance, it needs respect. And the more you give it that, through gentle stimulation, mindful breathing, and attention to warning signs, the more it will support you in return. Now let me ask you this. Have you ever found yourself turning to self-pleasure not because you really wanted to, but because you were trying to fill a space that had nothing to do with the body? Maybe out of boredom or stress or just that heavy kind of quiet that sometimes comes with living alone. If so, you're not the only one. And the next mistake we need to talk about speaks to the heart just as much as it does to the body. Let's explore that. Mistake number 4, using masturbation to escape loneliness, not connect with yourself. There's a kind of silence that fills the house after a spouse passes, or when the kids have grown and moved on and the familiar rhythm of everyday life slows to a quiet crawl. I remember one patient, Thomas, 70 years old, who sat in my office one winter morning. He looked down at his hands for most of the conversation, then finally looked up and said, "I don't even think I want to anymore, Doc, but I do it anyway. Not because I'm aroused, but because it fills the time." That moment struck me, because what he said wasn't really about sex, it was about loneliness. And that's something many older men struggle with in silence. See, masturbation, when it's driven by genuine desire, can be a healthy, even beautiful expression of self-connection. But when it becomes a daily habit to escape boredom, emotional pain, or simply to avoid the silence, it can gradually lose its meaning, and in some cases, become harmful to your emotional well-being. Thomas wasn't addicted to the act itself. He was trying to fill a deeper void, one that had very little to do with the body and everything to do with the heart. After his wife passed, he found himself isolated. His days were filled with long stretches of stillness, and the nights were even worse. He started turning to masturbation not as an act of pleasure, but more like a reflex, a placeholder for the connection he was no longer getting in real life. And he's not alone. Many older men use self-pleasure not because they feel a true urge, but because they feel something else. Restlessness, sadness, anxiety, or just plain emptiness. And while the act may bring temporary relief, it often leaves behind a deeper sense of isolation. The truth is, when masturbation is used to mask emotional hunger, it slowly disconnects us from the very intimacy we're trying to feel. It becomes mechanical, almost transactional. Something you do, not something you experience. Over time, that can blunt your sensitivity, not just physically, but emotionally. You begin to feel less joy, less curiosity, less motivation to engage with others. And worst of all, it becomes a private cycle of detachment, one you might not even notice until one day you ask yourself, why do I feel more alone after than I did before? Now, I want to be clear, there is absolutely nothing wrong with seeking comfort in your own body. That's a form of self-care. But when it replaces emotional connection rather than supporting it, that's when we need to pause and reflect. For Thomas, we didn't start with changing his routine. We started by changing his awareness. I asked him to pay attention to his motives. Was he doing it out of desire or out of habit? Was he hoping to feel something or to stop feeling something else? That simple question, am I seeking pleasure or avoiding pain, opened a door for him. He started making small changes. Daily walks, calling an old friend once a week, joining a local veterans group. Slowly, his sense of connection returned, not just with others, but with himself. And when he did choose to be intimate with his body again, it came from a place of warmth, not avoidance. It's easy to underestimate how much we crave connection as we age, and society doesn't always give older men the space to talk about it. We're told to be strong, independent, silent, but emotional isolation is real, and it carries real consequences for mental health, for heart health, and yes, even for sexual health. So if you found yourself going through the motions but feeling emptier after, take a moment to ask yourself why. Sometimes the cure for that emptiness isn't a physical act, it's a conversation, a walk, a shared laugh, or even just sitting with yourself in honesty and saying, I need more than this right now. You're not weak for feeling lonely. You're human, and recognizing that is not only brave, it's necessary. Now, I want you to think about this. Have you ever found yourself watching your body during those moments, not with curiosity or affection, but with judgment? Wondering if you're still working, still performing the way you used to? Maybe even feeling a quiet frustration if things don't go exactly as planned? Because the final mistake we're going to talk about has less to do with technique and everything to do with the silent expectations you place on yourself. And if you're not careful, it can turn a moment of peace into one of pressure. Let's talk about that next. Mistake number 5, ignoring erectile dysfunction or performance anxiety. There's a quiet pressure that lives inside many older men, a kind of unspoken test they give themselves every time they're alone. They might not talk about it, not even to their doctor, but it's there. That moment when they wonder, will it work this time? Followed by the tightening in the chest if it doesn't go the way they'd hoped. I've seen that look in more men's eyes than I can count, and I've heard it in their voices too. Shame disguised as silence. One of those men was Ronald, 67, who came in for a routine checkup but lingered at the end of our appointment. He hesitated, then asked if I had a few more minutes. He leaned in a little and whispered, I can't keep it up like I used to, Doc, and when I try, I start overthinking everything, then it just gets worse. Ronald wasn't looking for a pill. He was looking for reassurance that what he was experiencing didn't mean something was wrong with him as a man. And that's exactly what I told him. Because here's the truth too many older men never get to hear. Changes in sexual function after 60 are not a failure. They're normal. But the real damage doesn't come from those changes. It comes from what you believe they say about you. After a certain age, erections might take longer to arrive. They might not be as firm. They might fade sooner. None of this means you're broken. But when you treat those changes as a test, when every solo experience becomes a performance you're trying to pass, you trigger something much more dangerous: stress. And not just emotional stress, biological stress. Performance anxiety activates your body's stress response. Your brain releases cortisol, your heart rate rises, your blood vessels constrict. And since an erection depends on relaxed, open blood flow, all that stress works directly against the very thing you're trying to achieve. It's a cruel cycle. The more you worry, the harder it gets, literally and figuratively. What starts as a physical concern quietly turns into a psychological loop. You anticipate failure, you tense up, you feel discouraged. Then, the next time you expect even less. Over time, you might avoid the act altogether. Not because you've lost interest, but because you're tired of feeling disappointed in yourself. But here's what I tell my patients. You're not here to perform. You're here to feel. When Ronald let go of the idea that every session had to go all the way, everything changed for him. We reframe masturbation as something nourishing, not something he had to prove himself through. He focused on the sensation, on the pleasure of touch, on breathing, and most of all, on accepting whatever his body gave him that day. Sometimes that meant full arousal, other times it didn't. But either way, he stopped carrying shame, and when the pressure lifted, his body responded better too. Not because of magic, because of trust. And if there's one thing I've learned in all my years of practice, it's this: the body responds best when it feels safe. So if you've noticed changes in your performance, don't hide from them, and don't beat yourself up. Talk to someone. Whether it's your doctor, a therapist, or even a trusted friend, speaking it aloud removes the weight. And if something truly isn't right, like a persistent lack of arousal, discomfort, or changes in semen or sensitivity, addressing it early can prevent deeper issues later. You owe yourself peace, and peace doesn't come from perfect performance. It comes from presence, from connection, from honesty with yourself. I often say that your manhood isn't measured by how hard or how long. It's measured by your courage to care for yourself. That's real strength. Now we've walked through 5 of the most common mistakes older men make when it comes to self-pleasure. Some physical, some emotional, all important. But the real question is, what do you do with this knowledge? How do you take these insights and turn them into habits that support not only your sexual health, but your energy, your confidence, and your sense of wholeness as a man? Because in the final moments of this video, I want to leave you with something even more powerful than information. I want to leave you with a deeper understanding of what it means to age with dignity, strength, and yes, lasting pleasure. Let's talk about that next. Final thoughts. Sexual wisdom. After 60. There comes a moment in a man's life, often quietly, sometimes suddenly, when he realizes that his relationship with his body has changed, not ended, not diminished, but changed, and how he responds to that realization makes all the difference in the world. If you're a man in your 60s, 70s, or beyond, and you've been carrying questions, frustrations, or quiet fears about your body, your desire, or your performance, I want you to know this: you are not alone. Every man walks this path in his own way, but too many do it in silence. And silence, though sometimes comforting, can also keep us from healing. What we've talked about today isn't really about masturbation. It's about awareness. It's about giving yourself permission to evolve instead of trying to live up to expectations built for a younger body with a younger man's hormones and a younger man's pace. You're not that man anymore, and thank goodness for that. Because what you have now is something he never did: perspective. Pleasure after 60 is different. It's slower, it's deeper, it's quieter maybe, but it's no less meaningful. In fact, when approached with patience and intention, it can be more intimate than anything you experienced in your youth. You don't have to chase, prove, or perform anymore. Now is the time to enjoy your body as it is, not as it was and not as you think it should be. What I hope you take away from this conversation is not fear, not shame, and not some rigid set of rules, but a new lens. A new way of seeing these moments with yourself as acts of care, not obligation. You have the right to pleasure, to curiosity, to connection, and to the wisdom that tells you when something needs to change. And if something does need to change, start small. Slow your rhythm. Breathe more deeply. Touch more gently. Let go of any pressure to reach a certain outcome. Make space for emotion, for memory, even for grief if it arises. Your body holds stories, and it also holds healing. There's no shame in slowing down to listen. In my decades of working with men, I've learned this simple truth. The ones who age well, the ones who stay connected to their vitality, their confidence, and their peace aren't the ones who ignore change. They're the ones who meet it with grace. So wherever you are in your journey, I invite you to meet your body as it is today. Not with criticism, but with compassion. not with frustration, but with curiosity. There is still so much to explore, so much to feel, so much to enjoy, if you allow yourself the chance. You've earned this chapter of life. You've carried the weight, you've lived the decades, you've overcome the battles. This isn't the end of your intimate story, it's the beginning of a wiser, more present, more fulfilling version of it. And I'll leave you with this. You are not less of a man because you've slowed down. In fact, in this season of life, slowing down may be the most masculine thing you can do. It shows presence, it shows confidence, it shows that you know your worth doesn't come from performance, but from presence, from peace, and from being fully at home in the body you've lived in all these years. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope this message met you where you are and gave you a new way forward, one filled with respect for yourself, your health, and your continued capacity for pleasure and connection. Keep listening to your body, keep honoring it, and above all, keep living fully. You deserve nothing less. If this video spoke to you, if it brought you comfort, clarity, or simply made you feel seen, please take a moment to give it a like. It may seem small, but it helps more men like you find this message. And if you know someone else, a brother, a friend, a neighbor, who might benefit from hearing these truths, don't hesitate to share it with them. These are the conversations that change lives, and we're all in this together. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. What resonated most? What questions do you still have? Your voice matters here, and your story might be the one that helps another man feel less alone. If you'd like to support this work and help me continue creating content that speaks directly to the challenges men face after 60, consider making a small donation through the link below. Every bit goes toward producing thoughtful, honest, and empowering videos just for you. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss an episode. I'm Dr. James, and I'll be right here walking this path with you, one honest conversation at a time.